Welcome to Drive the Daf, clear, structured explanation of the daily Daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Pesachim Daf Mem Dalid is discussing situations in which you have forbidden foods or materials mixed into a larger container of permitted foods or materials. You have Isser mixed into Heter. And in some of these situations, it's forbidden to eat it, and if you do eat it, you get kares, even if you eat it just the concise of it. So the question is, why? You're not eating the minimum amount of the actual Isser. It's mixed into a larger amount of permitted stuff. Like, for example, you're eating chametz mixed into other things, as we've seen in the previous few daf. So you're violating the Isser. Now the question is why? How do we view it? So the Gemara is going to discuss 4 ways of looking at why is it that when you eat this mixture, and even though you're eating Isser and Heter mixed together, you're still considered violating the Isser. The first thing we will discuss is the concept of Heter mitztaref l'Isser. Maybe the permitted foods count towards the size. You're eating a kizayis of mixture, good. The Heter that's there counts towards the kizayis, and you violate the Isser. That'll be one approach. The Gemara will have a couple of kashas on that. The Gemara will say that that's very limited. It does not apply in most situations. Does apply in some cases. The Gemara will try to expand it, and the Gemara will have kashas on it. The next approach we'll see is that it only applies, it's true, you only violating the Isser when it's the type of Isser that there is no sheer kizayis. It's forbidden to eat even the tiniest amount, such as chametz on Pesach. It's forbidden to eat even a small amount. Maybe that's where you're violating the Isser by eating the mixture, because you're not getting a kizayis, but you are getting the minimum amount. Because there is no minimum amount. The Gemara's third approach will be that it's referring to the only time that this is a problem is when there is a kizayis b'chdei achilas pras. That is, you're eating a large enough amount of the mixture fast enough that you're actually getting a kizayis. The amount of Isser that's in there is high enough that when you eat the most you could eat to be considered an actual food, to actual eating, you're not stuffing your face, or normal eating, you're getting a kizayis of Isser there. That's the third approach. And the fourth approach is something called tam ke'ikr, which is that when you have the taste of Isser, the entire thing turns into Isser itself. It's not that it's the Heter counts as Isser, the Heter actually becomes Isser. And that'll be the fourth approach, which we shall discuss. The Gemara will then see where that applies all over Shas. Okay, so let's begin. So first of all, the Gemara quotes Rav Yochanan, who says that there are only 2 isurim in the Torah, where we say Heter mitztaref l'Isser, that the permitted materials counts towards the shear, counts towards the kizayis. What are those 2 things? So one is mishras. That's somebody who's a nazir is not allowed to eat any grape products, but the Torah says that if he eats grapes soaked in water, he violates the Isser for that. So there the Torah is clearly telling you that the water counts towards the Isser. So that's one place where the Heter counts towards the minimum size kizayis. And the other place is where you have the Isser of Se'or Bal Taktiru. You're not supposed to burn chametz on the Mizbeach as part of your carbon mincha. If you do, even if you're burning less than the minimum amount, you're still violating the Isser. That is how the Gemara explains the opinion of Rabbi Elazar, which we saw in the daf yesterday. He learns that just from the word kol. That's how he knows this halacha. Kol se'or the chol dvash leisaktiru. That extra kol says even if you're burning less than the minimum amount, you're still violating it, and that's because the Heter counts towards the minimum size, the kizayis. So the Gemara says, hold on a second, you're learning out of the word kol. The word kol says by Pesach also. It says by chametz on Pesach also. So you should use that to therefore teach you that when chametz is mixed into Heter on Pesach, you're also violating the Isser. The Heter also counts towards the Isser. So the Gemara says, yes, you're right, that's true. That is the third example of where the Heter counts towards the Isser. The reason why we didn't mention it is we wanted to focus on the case of the burning of the chametz on the Mizbeach because Abaye disagrees. Abaye says there's a different reason why you're violating the Isser when you put chametz on the Mizbeach, and that's because there's no minimum size. That Isser is violated even in any amount of chametz. We want to disagree with that and say that's not the explanation. The explanation is because the Heter counts towards the Isser. Okay, now the Gemara says that Rav Dimi said over this sugya, and Abaye asked him. Abaye says that I'll prove to you that this concept of Heter mitztaref l'Isser, that the Heter counts towards the minimum size Isser, applies in other places also. Where am I going to show it to you? From the halacha of a regular Jew, not a Kohen, Yisrael, who is forbidden to eat truma. And we'll see that in a mixture of truma, where it's mostly chulin, it's mixed with some truma spices, the entire thing becomes forbidden for him to eat, even just the kazayas of the mixture. And over there is going to have to be, obviously, because of this halacha of heter mitzdaref l'isser. The Gemara will answer that there's a different reason, and that's where we'll get to our next reason of so what's the Mishnah that Abaye quotes? So he brings a Mishnah which has as follows. We have a thick stew, something like oatmeal or something like that has spices mixed into it. It's got garlic and oil that is truma. So if the stew here is truma and the garlic, the spices are chul. In a case like that, if a tful yom, somebody who's a little bit tamei, touches the mixture, so the halacha is the entire thing is truma. The volume, the main thickness of the mixture is truma. There's a little bit of chulin spices mixed in. The entire thing counts as truma. Therefore, the entire thing becomes tamei, and truma becomes tamei from a tfil yom, and it's forbidden to eat. It's not tamei after being tamei something else, but it's forbidden for a kohen to eat. Now, what if it's the other way around? What if the thick mixture, the oatmeal, is chulin? It's not truma, and then the spices that you put in there, those are truma. And then a tfil yom comes and he touches the oatmeal. So there, the halach is that he doesn't make everything tamei. He doesn't make everything forbidden for a kohen to eat. He's allowed to eat it, but the spot that he touches does become forbidden for him to eat. The rest of it is okay. So the Gemara says, I don't understand. Most of this is chulin. There's a little bit of spices mixed in over here. Chulin doesn't become tamei if a tful yom touches it. It's not asur for him to eat. He's not matame chulin. So why is this whole mixture asur in the first place? Why is there even the spot that he touches? Why is that problematic? The Gemara says it must be because the whole mixture does have a certain status of truma. What's that status? That a kohen is the only one who's allowed to eat it. Yisrael is not allowed to eat the whole mixture. Now, why would that be? Says Abaye, this proves my point. The whole mixture, a kohen is not only a kohen is allowed to eat it. Yisrael is not allowed to eat it. Why? Obviously, the reason must be because heter mitzdaref le'isser. If a Yisrael would eat a kazayis of this, he would get malchus for eating truma, even though it's mostly chulin. There's only spices of truma here. So you see, heter mitzdaref le'isser, even here, not just the examples that Rav Yochanan brought. And the Gemara answers, and the Gemara says, here the concept is not heter mitzdaref le'isser. Here there's a different rule at play, and that is kazayis b'chdei achilas pras. That there's enough oil and garlic in this thing that if somebody eats a pras is the standard amount you would eat in one sitting. It's a standard amount, that's one meal. It's machlokes rishonim whether it's 6 egg size or 8 egg size, Rashi and the Rambam. But a pras is a standard eating. If somebody eats a standard eating, he's getting a kazayis worth of isser in there. So it's not that he's needs the heter to combine with the isser to get to the minimum size. He's eating a minimum size of truma. He's eating a kazayas of truma. When he eats one pras of their mixture, he's eating a kazayas of truma, and that's why he's violating the isser. That's why he gets malchus, because he ate a kazayas. Now, if it would be too diluted in the mixture, so that you would, let's say, have to eat 2 pras in order to get a kazayas, you couldn't eat it fast enough to get a kazayas, because the shear of eating is a kireches pras. If it takes the guy longer to eat it, then he didn't get a kazayis fast enough. He got a kazayis spread out over too long a time. He didn't do the yisr. Or if he stuffs it down quickly, that's not called eating. That's called stuffing. So here, the Gemara is now saying that you don't need any heter mitzdaref le'isser. You don't need to say that he's chayv for less than a kazayis. You have our third approach, which is kazayis b'chdei achilas pras. There's enough isser here that you're chayv. Now, the chiddush here is that this is an isser deraisa. The Gemara thought that kazayis b'chdei achilas pras, you were eating a kazayis, but you're eating it together with a lot of other things, but you're eating it fast enough, that's only an isser derabanan. The Gemara here is saying, no, it's an isser deraisa, and therefore this truma is also deraisa for Yisrael to eat, because he gets enough kazayis when he eats a pras worth of it. So the Gemara asks, are you sure that that's an Isser Daraisa? The Gemara says, yes, it's an Isser Daraisa. What's the problem? So the Gemara says, if that's true, so then how come the Rabbanan argue on Rav Elazar in the case of Kutach HaBavli? Kutach, we saw, is a mixture of chametz into other materials. Rav Elazar says it's a lav, it's an Isser Daraisa, and the Rabbanan say it's not. Why would the Rabbanan argue on that? If you're eating a kazayis b'chdei achilas pras, what's the problem? So the Gemara says, well, what do you want to say? It's because of heter mitzdaref le'isser? So if you're right that heter mitzdaref le'isser applies, so then why would the meaning this whole discussion was Abaye trying to prove that the truma is heter mitzdaref le'isser, and that heter mitzdaref le'isser applies in other halachos. So the Gemara says, what? So then you're trying to prove that the reason this truma works is because heter mitzdaref le'isser applies everywhere. So if that's true, so then why would the Rabbanan argue on Rabbi Elazar about Kutach HaBavli either? It's also heter mitzdaref le'isser. You should say it there also. So it must be that the reason that this truma case, the reason that you're violating the Isser if a Yisrael eats that a Truma is because of what we said, it's a Kazais B'chtei Achilas Pras. The Kutach HaBavli, Kutach is not something you could eat B'chtei Achilas Pras. You can't eat a Kazais of Kutach HaBavli B'chtei Achilas Pras. You can't eat a Kazais of Chametz in the Kutach B'chtei Achilas Pras because the Kutach is not food, it's a dip. People eat other things dipped in it. You can't eat a dip fast enough that you'll eat an entire dip in a Kedei Achilas Pras and get a Kazais. Because you don't eat it straight, you just eat it together with other foods. So you'll never get a kazai's worth of it in one sitting. And if you do eat it straight, you just eat spoonfuls of kutach. Gemara says that's not a normal way of eating. It doesn't count as an achila. You're eating an abnormal food in an abnormal way. It's not called eating at all, and therefore you're not violating the Isser whatsoever. Okay, now the Gemara asks a couple of kashas on this halacha that kazais b'chtei achilas pras, if you have a mixture of Isser into Heter, where there's a kazais of the Isser mixed in a concentration high enough that if I eat a pras of the Isser, I'll get if I eat a pras of the Heter, I'll get a kazais of Isser, that counts as a dairaisa. The Gemara has a couple of questions on that. The Gemara's kasha is where I have two pots, one's truma, one's chulin, and I have two spice grinders, one's truma and one's chulin, and some spice falls into the pots. So now I don't know what fell where. I don't know if the truma spices fell into the chulin pot or not. Maybe the truma spices fell into the truma pot and only chulin spices fell into the chulin, and that would mean that everything's okay. So the Gemara says you're allowed to assume that everything fell where it's supposed to go. The truma fell into the truma, and the chulin fell into the chulin. You don't have to be afraid that truma spices fell into the chulin pot, and therefore it's permitted for a Yisrael to eat it. So Gemara says, how are you allowed to assume things like that? The halacha is you're only allowed to assume things like that where the only isser that's problem, the potential problem here is only derabanan. But you're telling me that kazayis b'chtei achilas pras is an isser deraisa, so then I should have to be afraid that maybe the truma fell into the chulin. Gemara says, no. Kazayis b'chtei achilas pras is an isser deraisa. The reason this is derabanan is because spices are only chayiv in truma miderabanan, and therefore the whole isser is only derabanan. But really, the concept of kazayis b'chtei achilas pras is a deraisa. Gemara says, not so fast. I have another brisa. The brisa is not the same exact case, but it's not talking about spices. It's talking about you have real food. Truma falls in, chulin falls in. We don't know what fell where. We don't know if the truma fell to truma, chulin fell to chulin. Maybe the truma fell to chulin. What should I do? You're allowed to assume that the truma fell to truma and not into chulin. So now what are you going to say? It's not spices. This is okay. It's derabanan for a different reason. Truma in our days, where there's no Beis Hamikdash, is a derabanan, and therefore the entire concept is derabanan altogether, and you don't have to worry about it at all. Okay, now the Gemara is going to move into the concept of tam ke'ikr. Tam ke'ikr means that something which has flavor of isser, the entire material turns into isser. If you have a potato soaked with the flavor of chaylev, the potato is isser. It itself is an usser potato. You eat a kazayas of that potato. Even if all you got is the taste of isser, you didn't even eat any actual chaylev whatsoever, but it was cooked, let's say, in a pot with chaylev. The potato is isser. You eat a kazayas of it, you're violating the isser of eating chaylev. The fact that it tastes like isser makes it isser itself. So this is different than heter mitzdaref l'isser, where the heter is heter and the isser is isser. This is the heter itself is nishapech is the key word. It turns into isser because of the concept of tam ke'ikr. The taste of it makes the entire thing be isser itself. So this is introduced by the Gemara asking a question on the halacha of mishras. We said that a nazir violates the isser daraisa even if he eats grapes soaked in water. He eats water that had grapes soaked in it, and now it has grape flavor to it. So the Gemara says, but we had said that mishras in the Torah was teaching me the halacha of heter mitzaref l'isser. The Gemara says, but I have a brisa that says it doesn't teach me heter mitzaref l'isser. It teaches me tam ke'ikr. It teaches me that what's happening is that the entire water turns into isser for the nazir because it's all got grape in it. So the Gemara says that that is the Rabbanon, and we are Rabbi Akiva. We the Rabbanon are the ones who hold of Tam Ke'ikr. When we said the halacha of Heter Mitzaref L'Isser, we were going in the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. So Gemara says Rabbi Akiva. Who's Rabbi Akiva? Which Rabbi Akiva? Where do you see Rabbi Akiva who says Tam Ke'ikr? So the Gemara says we have two attempts at finding this Rabbi Akiva. The first is where a Nazir soaked his bread in wine. So Rabbi Akiva says that if it combines to a kazayis, so he violates the Yisr. If he eats it, he's chayav malchus for violating his nazirus. So you see that the wine and the bread combine to a kizayis. You see that Rabbi Kiva holds over the halacha of heter mitzdarif le'isser. So Gemara says, no, maybe over there he's eating a kizayis of actual wine, but we call it combining because since the wine is absorbed throughout the bread, so you don't have a cup of wine here. You have wine spread out in the bread. So you have to combine all the bits of wine soaked throughout the bread. That's what we mean by combining. So where says this is a different Rabbi Kiva, this is a similar halacha. Rabbi Kiva says if a nazir soaked his bread in wine and he eats a kazayas of the bread or a kazayas of the wine, there if he eats a kazayas of the bread and a kazayas of the wine, there it is aser and he gets malchus. So there he clearly says that it's a kazayas of the bread and wine together that combine. So now let's go deeper into this halacha of tam ke'ikr, the Gemara says. So the Chachamim say that tam ke'ikr applies in kol haterakula. They argue on Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva says that mishras is not for tam ke'ikr. The Chachamim say the mishras by nazir is teaching me the halacha of tam ke'ikr, which is again means that the taste counts as the iser itself. And we learn from there to the kol haterakula to everywhere else. Now the Gemara says, how do you learn to kol terakula? So the Chachamim say that it's simple. You can learn, let's say, to kilayim by 3 kal v'chomers. Think about it. The Isser of Nazir is very limited Isser. It doesn't last forever. It only lasts for 30 days. It's not Asr b'hana. It's only Asr b'achila. It's only Asr to eat. And you could even take the Isser off. You could go to a Chacham and take your Naziris off. It's very light, mild Isser. And yet, we say there, the Tam Ke'ikr, the taste counts as the Isser itself. So you certainly say the same thing by Kilayim, where you don't have any of those things. It's Asr B'hana, it's the Isser lasts forever, and the Isser cannot be removed. Now let's say you want to talk about Arla. So Arla, you have 2 of those 3. Arla lasts forever. The Isser, something that becomes Arla lasts forever, but it's not forever on the tree. The tree is only Arla for 3 years, so it's limited in that sense. But you can't take the Isser off, and it is also Asr B'hana. So you have 2 out of the 3 Kavachamers applies to Arla. So the Gemara says, according to Chachamim, you learn from Nazir, the Tam Ke'ikr applies everywhere in Kol Terakula. So Gemara says, what is Rabbi Akiva? Where does he know the halacha of Tam Ke'ikr? Where does he know that? Let's say you have a tiny amount of pig fat in your cholent, but it adds flavor to the whole thing. The taste of it. How does he know that the entire cholent is also for you to eat, just as if you were eating the iser itself? So Gemara says Rabbi Kiva learns it out of basar and chalav, milk and meat together. The Torah says it's forbidden to eat milk and meat together. Now, if you cook meat and milk, now you take it out of the milk. That's asr. That piece of meat is asr. All it has is the flavor of the milk in there. Why is that asr? Just flavor. The Torah is teaching you that the taste makes the actual isser itself. So why did the Rabbanan learn from there? Versus the Rabbanan say you can't learn anything out of basar b'chalav. Basar b'chalav is a strange, unique halacha. It's not like any other halacha we have, and therefore you cannot learn anything from basar b'chalav to anywhere else. It has unique rules. Gemara says, what's unique about basar b'chalav? What's so unique about it? Gemara has 2 attempts to figure out what's unique about it that sets it apart. Gemara first says you have heter and heter, 2 permitted things, put them together, and it becomes iser. Where do you find such a thing? Gemara says that's not a chiddush. You find such a thing. Kilayim, you have grapes and vegetables. Plant them together, they become aser. You have flax and wool. Plant them together. Linen and wool. Plant them together, they become aser. Different animals hitched to the same wagon, they become aser. That's not a strange concept at all. So Gemara says no. So the chiddush is something else. The chiddush is that the iser is only if you cook it. If you have milk, you have meat soaking in milk for 24 hours, it becomes aser d'Rabbanan, but not aser d'Oraisa. So the combination is not Asr. Cooking it together makes an Isser. That's something you don't see anywhere else. Cooking creates an Isser. That's a whole new idea. So Gemara says, no, Rabbi Akiva, then how does he learn out of basar b'chalav? Basar b'chalav is a new idea. So Gemara says, you're right. Rabbi Akiva does not learn from basar b'chalav, he learns from somewhere else. He learns from the fact that the Torah said that when Klal Yisrael went to war against Midian and they conquered their kalim from them, their pots and their pans, they had to kasher them. Why did they have to kasher them? They didn't have any isser in them, they just had the taste in them that the goyim had soaked into the pots and the pans when they used them. It's just taste. Why should taste be a problem? Obviously, you see tam ke'ikr, you see that the taste itself is forbidden. Now, the Gemara says, so again, if that's Rabbi Akiva's source, why don't the Chachamim use that as source? So the Gemara says again, same thing. Rabbanan will tell you that that's also a chiddush. It's also a unique halacha, and you can't learn from there to anywhere else. The Gemara says, what's unique about the halacha of kashering the pots? Why is that unique? The Gemara says, I'll tell you why it's unique. Usually, anything that gives a bad flavor is not usher. It has to give a good flavor for it to be usher. It has to be good to eat for it to be usher. The source of that is the Torah says when you take a nevela, when you have an animal that's nevela, you should give it to a guy. You should give it to the ger toshav who lives in your land. So you see that it's only called nevela. The isra nevela only applies. It's something that I could give to a guy, something that tastes good, somebody else would eat. Anything where the taste goes off and it's spoiled and it's no good, that does not count as isser. Now, the flavor that comes from the pots of the goyim, it's once it's in the pot 24 hours, it's already off. It's already spoiled. It gives a bad flavor, and therefore it doesn't count. Someone says, okay, it's a good point. This is that it is unique. So how could Rabbi Kiva learn from there? So Rabbi Kiva says the Torah only required you to kasher something which was used within 24 hours. It wasn't saying kasher something which was used more than 24 hours ago. That would be a chiddush. The Torah didn't say that. The Torah said kasher something that's fresh, and that's not an isser. That's not a chiddush. So Gemara says, what are the Rabbanan going to respond to that? And the Rabbanan will say, even if it's fresh, it starts spoiling as soon as it's soaked into the pot. It's definitely bad flavor. It's got to be off.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.